Okay, so now we're armed with a clear purpose. It's time to actually start planning our project. And in this, we're going to talk about adopting an agile mindset. So let's think about how we would normally plan a project, and we'll do it the logical way, right? So whenever we do, we kind of establish a vision. What are we trying to achieve? What are the requirements of this particular project? And what do we need to do? And we get that down, and then we kind of maybe boil it down to specific. What are the things that need to get done? And then maybe who's going to do it. So now we put our plan together, we put a schedule together, and this week we're going to do this, and next week we're going to do that, and next month we're going to have this, and then 6 months later, project's going to be done. It's going to be great. And then you roll out, you do that plan. So you get moving, and you follow that plan perfectly, and at the end you celebrate your success. Hooray! Does this sound like any project you've ever worked on? This is what they call the waterfall approach, and this is what they used in software forever. And there's a big problem with it. It just doesn't work at all, because on step 2 or step 3, as soon as you start going to implement that plan, reality hits you, and all of a sudden you're off in all kinds of different directions, right? And so for many years, organizations everywhere tried to continue to follow this approach, even though the reality was it just doesn't ever work and doesn't make sense. And so there's all kinds of different ways you could try to change it, but really the idea of trying to predict the future and be optimistic about a project going perfectly is fundamentally flawed. So in order to deal with this, a bunch of software developers got together 20 odd years ago, and they were tired of projects going completely awry and them delivering something and then not being what anybody wanted, or being constantly late. And so basically, and there's some pretty dramatic examples of that, the failure of that waterfall method. But what they did was came up with something they called the Agile Manifesto, and there's kind of 4 main values. The first one is individuals and interactions over processes and tools, and if we kind of translate this, in the blog post that you read before this video spends a little time talking about this, but essentially what that means to everyone outside the software development world is that we want people to self-organize and talk to each other constantly. And rather than try to say, like, step by step, this is exactly how it's going to happen, let's just agree on that clear purpose, and let's try to do a bunch of stuff, and we'll talk about it constantly, and so that we can kind of keep ourselves on the same picture. And these interactions are more important ultimately than trying to spell out the perfect plan. The second one is they said working software over comprehensive documentation. So rather than document how things are going to be or how things should be, they just build stuff, and then they test it, and then they put it in front of people, and then they go from there, right? So getting stuff done is better than talking about or writing getting stuff done. So instead of producing a 50-page project plan, try step 1, get some feedback from it, and then plan step 2 to 3. Instead of trying to, just put all your eggs in this big plan and have it go awry. Then the third one, is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And what this means to the rest of us is stay in touch and listen to your stakeholders and end users. So in the case of building a school, whatever we can involve parents and students as the ultimate end users of our product, then the better it's going to be. So the more you can kind of stay in touch and stay grounded with the reality and the people who are doing the work and people who are closest, the more successful a project will be ultimately, right? Especially you as a leader of the project or trying to be the project manager, you need to kind of have if you're making decisions, you need to have a good handle on what's happening. And then the last one is probably the most important, is this idea of responding to a change over following a plan. So back to Jeff Bezos' quote of being stubborn on the vision and flexible in the details. The how you get something done or whether it follows what you predicted doesn't make any difference whatsoever. It doesn't even make a difference if even the how and what of what you're going to do changes over time, but you still achieved the why. You're still satisfying the why. Then you're good, right? So, and that's why it's so important to start with a clear purpose. So these are kind of the 4 principles, I guess, of the Agile Manifesto. But I want to pull out some key concepts, some key lessons that you can learn when you're planning your own projects. The first one is plan for reality or embrace reality. So if Bob on your team never gets anything done on time and is always a week late, don't assume he's going to get it done on time this time. Just plan for that part of things. Or maybe Bob's not doing the thing that is best for him. So trying to put the one team person that that they just can't do that particular thing, find their strength and move them elsewhere. Don't assume anything's going to be done on time. Don't assume you're always optimistic. So maybe always build in time for things to go wrong, and you'll be much better off. The next kind of concept is this idea of small but frequent iterations. So again, if you're trying to get something done, you're building a new curriculum that has a really different kind of take on things. Build a small unit and try it out somehow, and try to see how that goes, rather than kind of building an entire course based on that idea and then realizing that it's flawed at the end. So however you can break down a bigger idea into smaller chunks that are more manageable and testable, then you're better off, because you can adjust before you're too off course. Which leads me to the third one, is the idea of failing fast. So when you're given a huge list of things you have to get done for a project, what's the riskiest thing there, and try to do that first. And the idea of failing fast is trying to find the things that are unknown and things are most likely to fail, and try to do that early on in the project so you can learn from it and adapt it. You don't want to discover those things at the end of a big project. So number 4, which is touched on in the principles, is the idea of self-organized teams. So the more we can empower people on a team to just do their job without necessarily needing approval of things or whatever. The other part of that is having empowered teams. So teams that own the final piece of everything. So if everything falls on, say, the school leader to deliver, that's not enough. Like, we have to have the team kind of embraced and engaged, and they have to own their successes and failures in their process. So teams really have to kind of be decision makers in their own project. And then the last one, which is going to be really important for kind of the day-to-day, is making work transparent. So there's no need to know, or it's all about kind of setting up a work environment where everybody can kind of see the overall progress. Everybody understands. Everybody can access what they need to get their job done without having to go through somebody else or some weird procedure or something like that. So the more we can kind of put work out there and make it transparent, not in a way that distracts everybody, it's in a way that empowers everybody and allows them to kind of get to what they need when they need to get it. So in this idea of Agile is sort of a general set of principles, and then a bunch of people took it and developed specific frameworks and methodologies for making that happen. And by no means do you have to follow these methodologies perfectly, but there's lots of things to learn from it. And one of the most popular implementations of Agile methodologies is called Scrum. Crazy name, based on rugby. But they have a very specific framework for how to operate a project. And this is another area where you can really go deep, and you can become a certified Scrum practitioner and an Agile coach and all these kinds of things. But we're just going to try to pull out some kind of just lessons learned. So let's kind of simplify it a little bit. And the thing that's the essence of Scrum is the idea of a sprint rhythm. So you're trying to break down a big project into smaller chunks called sprints. And then you're trying to do those sprints, and then you're trying to learn from them and adjust for the next sprint. So think about when you're planning a project, the first thing you do, get everyone together, brainstorm a master list of to-dos. So a big thing of all the things you need to get done. If you need to categorize it, you can do that. And they call this the backlog. So it's basically a list of all the things that need to get done over the course of the project. And then we take that and we want to grab, so let's say the top 3 ones, and maybe it's something that's, you want to fail fast, so you grab the most risky one, or whatever you need to do to prioritize, but you take enough that you can get done in, say, 2 to 3 weeks. You decide on how long your sprints need to be, or you want them to be. So you want to grab those and you want to start working on them. And one of the things they implement is this idea of a daily meeting. They call it a stand-up meeting. And the reason why they call it a stand-up meeting is because it's really important these meetings don't last too long. And so originally when it was implemented, it's done actually standing up, because there's some research to show that people standing up are going to talk less and want to move on. But the idea is it's just a daily check-in. What am I working on? What have I done? What am I going to be working on? And what's kind of blocking me, or what problems? And it's not the idea to solve those problems there, but to get them all out in the open and to have kind of daily interaction so everybody knows what's going on. So this kind of happens around and around to get the sprint done, and all that chunk of work, we'll call it a sprint. And the idea is at the end of it, you can look back from the 2 to 3 weeks and something got done, something that your team can kind of say, hey, we've achieved that, we've accomplished that, we've learned something important, or whichever. At the end of the sprint, it's really important to have a review. And so first of all, there's sort of 2 meetings that often happen. One is what the specific work was that was achieved, so that everybody knows what the progress that's been made. And then the second one is a retrospective. And we're going to get into that a little bit more, but the importance of the retrospective is not about the work, it's about the process, about the tools, it's about the team, and it's a way to really check in and make sure things are working well and figure out what needs to be changed in your process in the next sprint. So we'll call that section kind of the sprint review. And this is kind of done continuously until your project's complete, or maybe your project's never complete. It's something that always work to get done. But the more you can kind of adopt this sprint rhythm, it's much easier to run 100 meters and take a break than it is to run a marathon continuously. So that's what we kind of try to do, is organize things in sprints. Back to the kind of master list here. Don't assume that this master list doesn't change either. We try not to affect the to-do list in the middle of a sprint, but the master list is always growing, changing. They in the Scrum world call it grooming the backlog. So the idea of always reprioritizing what's new coming in. So there's somebody kind of in charge of kind of making sure that we have a good, solid list of to-dos, and sometimes that changes drastically. But the idea is that you're always kind of working on little chunks of it over time. And then this process we want to make transparent as much as possible. So along the way, we want to set up tools and processes for making this a very visible process so the entire team can see what's going on. And even stakeholders that aren't necessarily part of the team but have a vested interest in the outcome of the team, then making work transparent does it for them. It works for them too. So going back to this kind of idea of this, each one of these kind of decisions is a place where things can kind of either go away from your purpose or towards your purpose. If you think about each one of those as a sprint, then each sprint offers an opportunity to correct these arrows and bring the team kind of more focused so that you can ultimately get towards your clearer purpose. And it's an important kind of thing to keep in mind. So kind of if you consider work to be that, each one of these arrows is a sprint, then we review, we adjust, then we can kind of continually keep the team on course, moving towards where they should be going.